This is Mark McNeese, and you're listening to One Thing or Another, interviews and conversations. Welcome to the first One Thing or Another podcast of 2021, everybody. This is your host, Mark, and I'm excited to be bringing these back this year. I took a few months off because of, why not? It was an incredibly difficult year in 2020, and I had a lot of other stuff going on like everybody else. But I'm bringing the interviews back, and I'm really happy to be doing the first one of this year with a friend who's also a very successful voiceover artist and a martial arts instructor and all of these great things. It's Harry Legg. So I just want to read a little bit about Harry from his bio. Harry voiced some of the world's most iconic brands: NBC Sports, Nike, Kodak, McDonald's, Mountain Dew, MTV, Nickelodeon, and many more. Besides stations here in the States, you have a large international roster as a voiceover artist in stations in Australia, Austria, Belgium, Bonaire, Brazil. It's the whole alphabet, so I'm going to clip that one. Your career took him to legendary stations in the top 3 U.S. markets: Chicago, Los Angeles, and New York. We're going to talk about all of that stuff. You are also, Harry, since you're listening, you've got a martial arts bio here too. You're the founder of the New Jersey Tai Chi, and you teach Tai Chi. I can't pronounce these. You're going to have to do it for us. Push hands and self-defense at your private Verona, New Jersey studio. All right, Harry, let's get on here because you can actually tell us all about these a lot more effectively than I can read them. So how are you?
I'm doing great, Mark. Thanks for having me. It's a thrill to be doing this with a friend and to be the first one of the new year. So
now, I told you before we started recording that you sound. I mean, and this is how you really sound in real life. You've got your voiceover voice, but this is kind of how you really sound.
Well, yes. It's funny you say that because there's you know me well, so you hear it right away. Yeah. There's a coffee shop down the street from me where I've got a whole bunch of friends, and I go regularly. It's kind of like a non-alcoholic version of Cheers. We hang around the big table, and as I would meet new people there over the years, someone else would pipe up and go, "Hey, you know what Harry does?" Yeah, and they don't really hear it. Now, maybe you do, but they don't really hear it when I'm talking like this. But then they'll go, "Hey, bring up one of your things on YouTube." And I'm like, "Oh, boy. Okay, here we go." And then when they hear me, tonight on NBC, they're like, "Whoa, yeah, I would never have gotten that." But you see, it's not like I'm really putting that voice on. It's just, right, how are you using that voice? And it's a gift. I'm thrilled to have it. Of course, many voiceover actors and artists, you don't need to have that stereotypical announcer voice. Mm-hmm. In fact, it can be detrimental sometimes because they want people that sound real. The days of the old-fashioned announcer are over.
Well, some of it, I think, is your enunciation. You enunciate very clearly, and that's part of it.
It is. Yes. I was lucky as a kid. My parents were very supportive. I was one of those precocious kids. Well, I don't know about that. Well, yeah, maybe. Walking into kindergarten, spelling Mississippi and psychiatrist, and already having really good verbal skills as a little kid. So it was just kind of carried through. So I'm very fortunate that way.
So grade me on that intro. Was it okay?
Now, see, that's not fair. Everyone, before we started recording, okay, I got to tell you, Mark's like, "I'm on with a professional. I'm like, "Oh, come on. Don't worry about it. Who cares? It's no big deal."
That's okay. All right. No, I'm kidding. I'm not putting you in the spot. Tell people a little bit about Harry Legg. What's the 411 on you?
Well, I fell in love with radio in grade school. Started hanging out at a station, and it was 5th or 6th grade in my hometown of Cleveland, Ohio. While, of course, as a kid, I loved pop music, top 40, but it wasn't really so much about that. It was about the larger-than-life fun that I was hearing the DJs on the air having, especially back then. For me, that would have been the late 70s, early 80s. And you don't hear as much of that now, not to go on a negative tangent about radio. But back then, that's what lured me in. And I also liked, when we talk about larger than life, the production And for those that may not know what that is, that's the pre-recorded stuff that would go in between the songs. And you'd hear, the beat of New York, KTU, and really big and cool, and with the laser zaps and all that stuff. When you're a kid, that's like super, super cool. So I fell in love with all of that and wanted to know how to do it. Did my first on-air show at a commercial station at 14 years old. All through high school, hung out at stations, interned, and then worked at an NPR affiliate. So that's where I got the other side of the business, from top 40 to news. And it's funny because on top 40 stations, especially back then, the DJs were all hyped up. All hit 92Q, blah, 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 blah. And they're talking like that. And then I work at the NPR station. It's Cleveland Public Radio, where we practically whisper, because we're very educated. As I like to joke. We would never dare show excitement.
Well, that's kind of there is sort of a stereotype, and you've seen it on SNL.
Oh yeah,
with the public broadcasting types,
Exactly. So I make fun of both sides of it, of course. Anyway, and so I to get through this, I traveled and lived and worked in 8 different cities throughout the U.S. Working just about every format in radio, having just about every position at a radio station, from just one of the DJs to a morning guy to a news person to a production guy to music director, program director, and on and on. I did hit the big 3 and in a row. It was really kind of neat. I worked in Chicago, then Los Angeles, and then in the New York City market, which is where I still live. And having lived in 8 different cities and working in all of those great markets, when I was downsized, or riffed, as they like to say in the corporate world, a reduction in force.
I was going to ask you what that acronym was.
Yeah, reduction in force. Isn't that great corporate speak? But anyway, I had worked at the legendary WKTU in New York City. It was a flame-throwing dance station. And nowadays it is a more generic sounding rhythmic CHR that would sound the same in just about every city in America. So there's my little dig at radio. It's been so corporatized and cookie cutterized, but when I was there, you could not pick up that station and drop it in middle America. It would have been out of place because we lived and served for New York City, and we sounded that way. So anyway, I was let go in the very end of 2006. And at that point in time, my immediate gut reaction was, oh my gosh, I got to go get another radio job. But then I said, wait a minute. This is a train that never ends. Every radio job I've had has lasted 2 years, 3 years. The longest was 4 years. Because there was always, and I know there are people that have gigs that last way longer than that, but I also have tons of friends in the same boat of me that are all over the nation. And every few years, I lost my gig because there's a management change, a format change, an ownership change, on and on and on. So I said, the heck with that. I am not going to move again. Mm-hmm. Plus, my partner from Chicago wanted to be in New York City as an actor. And if I had told him, hey, I got a job in, Sacramento, he'd been like, huh? What? Our relationship was strong, but still. And I didn't want to do that to him. And frankly, and not to sound spoiled, but after Chicago, LA, and New York, what else would be cool? Okay, yeah, maybe Miami, could be neat to be in Boston or Philly or something like that. But really, I'd kind of done what I was going to do in radio. And while being in radio, I already had stations around the world that I was the voice for. That was something I kind of did on the side. Mm-hmm. And I said, and one other thing, I had just bought a house a year prior to being let go. And they say that's the radio person's curse. Buy a home, you lose your gig. Yep, happened to me. And so there was all that stress. And how do I get through this? But I hung my voiceover shingle out officially. And being fortunate enough to be, at that point in time, having somewhat of a profile, being a bit of a commodity in the business, I was fortunate. People kind of knew who I was to a degree. And so when I hung out my shingle to do voiceover full time, I had a running head start. And that made it a little easier for someone that doesn't have that to just jump into voiceover, and especially on the radio imaging side. That's a hard thing to do, and even harder now than it was, 15 years ago or so.
Now, is that the house that you live in now, you and Lenny?
It is, yes, yeah. I managed to hold on to it. Moved into it in 2005. Yep. And so I've been doing voiceover ever since then. And it is a roller coaster. I think anyone that works for themselves and has their own business knows there's a lot of ups and downs. But if you stick through and you're consistent and, you work your butt off, hopefully you'll have success. COVID has been a challenge, of course.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that, how that has impacted, because, it would be easy for me to think, well, he's doing this from a home studio. Did it increase business? Did it hurt business? What happened last year for you?
Well, for me, I took a massive hit. I was the voice of the now defunct NBC Sports Radio Network that had me on over 400 stations across the nation. And March 31st, they shut the network down. Sports was tanking and fired everyone. So it's not like it's going to come back.
Yeah.
So that getting a network VO gig is kind of a dream. And, I had one for 7 years. I started the network and went with them till the day they shut down. So making up for that hasn't quite happened yet. That's not something you snap your fingers and replace. In fact, it probably would not be replaced with one gig unless I should hit the lottery again and get another network VO gig. It will take many gigs to equal that one. But fortunately, my eggs aren't all in one basket. I do voice stations all around the world. And so it's like anything. You gain one, you lose one, you gain one, you lose one as they make changes at stations. And I don't just do that. I voice commercials. I voice corporate narrations, pharmaceutical, stuff. Really, there's no limit to what you can voice. I have personally decided to not voice audiobooks, which I know you write, these wonderful books, and you have people that voice them. And I remember way back when you're like, Harry, what do you think of voicing one of my books? And I'm like, oh my goodness, thank you, Mark. What an honor that you would ask me. It's just not the business model that I have. Voicing books is quite the commitment. Takes quite a few sessions, quite a few days in a row. And I teach martial arts, and it just no one that is hiring you to voice books wants to hear, oh, so you won't be available Tuesday, and then you're only available part of the day Wednesday. They don't want to hear that.
No, and since you brought this up,
yes,
I also know too that audiobook narration is very few people really make any money at it. And like the highest paid audiobook narrator was maybe $150,000 or something. Somebody who went to a conference told me that. The accuracy of that I don't know, but I do know from having hired narrators, the pay really sucks unless you're in the $400 an hour kind of, that level.
Yep.
So it's just not worth it. I mean, I'm actually narrating my own new book myself, but not as an audiobook. I'm putting it on SoundCloud.
Okay.
Because then I don't have to worry about meeting some kind of production standards. It's good, you know what I mean? But I would never do it for a living is where I'm going with that. It's like, no, absolutely not. It's enough to take a year to write a book that pays me, a little bit of something for a bike or a new bike or a vacation or something like that. But I would never do voice. I would never do audiobook narration.
Sure. Well, a lot of people that do it, and I have friends that do audiobook narration, they really enjoy it. And it's part of their passion. And that I totally admire, because there are many things that I know both you and I do that it's not about the money. It's about the passion. And sometimes when you do things for the passion, the money just follows. That can happen as well.
Yes. Yeah. So. It's like you were saying, it's hard to break into, oh my God, voiceover. It's hard to be a really top tier audiobook narrator. I mean, they're out there,
Yes.
but there's an awful lot of them that they've got to be doing it for love because they're not paying their rent with it.
Right, exactly. It's a part of it. And it also depends on, I've heard this argument. So this is not a bragging or showing off. It's just to give a realistic idea. I could voice one commercial, and depending on where it airs, it's all about usage. A lot of times people think it's about the length. Well, you charge more for a 60 than a 30 or than a 15. Well, yeah, there's a little of that, but it's more about, is this just airing locally? Is it not airing? Is it just on the internet? Is it on radio? Is it on TV? Is it on cable? Is it on the World Wide Web? And you get paid for everywhere it's going. So I could voice one commercial and make, literally $10,000.
Yeah,
it's a national thing. And it took me the exact same amount of time to voice that 30-second commercial that's national as the one that might pay me $300 that's just for a local car dealership or something.
Yeah.
So it's all about usage. So I don't know where I was going with that, but that's part of how that side of things works.
Can we move into the martial arts side of things?
Sure.
Because I also want to. Oh, go ahead.
So when I got let go from WKTU, I had the New York City sized salary. I was a creative director and the voice of the station, and I had a very comfortable life, which included having the swanky $100 an hour personal trainer at the cool gym in the city. Well, when I lost the job, that's the first thing that the plug got pulled on. Couldn't afford that, and it wasn't wise to try to be able to afford that at that point in time. And so I sat in my studio here at home. I want to say exactly moping, but a little worried. The natural level of depression that someone has when they lose their job. And my partner said to me, you're back in the studio all day. You used to work out 2 or 3 times a week. You need to do something. And he goes, I don't care what it is, but find something and do it. So I owe him for giving me that nudge. But at the same time, I was working out in the city, and part of that, and it didn't turn me on to go to the gym down the street with all the soccer moms,
Mm-hmm.
and now that it's just about that, but I had worked out at gyms since I was a teenager, and I kind of wanted something different. And I'd always thought about martial arts. I didn't know how to fight or really kick or punch or whatever, even though I'm a somewhat bigger guy. And so I went online and did a bunch of research, and I found a school that taught 8 different martial arts. And most of the other schools I found only taught 1 or 2. And a good school is going to let you come there, check it out, try at least a class, if not a week, for free, just to see if it's a good fit and if you like it, and on and on. So I went to this school, and I said, how is it that you teach 8 different arts and every other place I'm looking at is just one thing? And they had a very good answer at the time. It was, well, when you go to regular school, do you just take biology? No, you take history and you take math and you take, whatever. So we teach 8 different arts, and you will have a really good foundation in them. And then as you get to the black belt level, you can decide which one you want to focus on. So it really pulled me in. I was a maniac. I went there, a bad week for me was 4 days out of the week. I was usually there 5 or 6 days a week training. I really, really liked it. And then I learned through meeting my master level Sifu is teacher, who's based in Tennessee, that what I was learning at this school, not that it was bad, but it was really just kind of kung fu exercise class.
Mm-hmm.
I was not learning all the body qualities and body states and energies and really the higher level stuff, and how to really fight and also how to really heal myself and others, because it does go there. And that's what really pulled me in. Because anyone, and again, I don't want to sound for anyone that does other martial arts, or God knows, anything you put out there in the media and on the internet, it can come back at you. So I'm always very careful of how you say what you say.
Mm-hmm.
But there are a lot of people that are doing martial arts and think they're a badass because they got a black belt and they got it in a few years or so. And we just go, oh my gosh, you really don't know, do you? Learning a bunch of forms. And for those that don't know what forms are, in the dance world, that would just be choreography. Learning choreography where you can say, oh, show me what you got. And you always see it when you look at a tournament or something in martial arts, and the martial artist is out on the floor and they're doing all these moves and it's choreographed and whatever. It might look really cool. But if that's all you've learned, you can't fight. You don't know how to heal. Now, maybe you've conditioned your body really well. Maybe you're getting into really low positions, or you're kicking high, or, whatever those things are. And sure, that's good for you and good for your cardio and flexibility and all that. I would never downgrade that. And I'm glad I have some of that training. But the real stuff is way, way, way beyond that. So I focus on the internal arts, Tai Chi in particular, thus New Jersey Tai Chi. And it is so deep that it is multiple lifetimes of learning. I've had the entire, and I kind of hate this word because it has a freaky connotation to people, but I'll use it, the cosmology of Tai Chi, or maybe the roadmap, the path from where do you start to where does it go, is massive. And I have learned to do things that if you had told me years ago were even possible, I'd have said, yeah, right, get out. You're crazy. You're some new age mystical nut job.
Mm-hmm.
No. And I think most of my friends know that I'm one of the, I'm pretty down to earth. I'm not, out there in the ether. So learning how to feel another person's energy and how to manipulate it, both for martial and for healing, is mind-blowing. Being able to do long distance healing and truly connect to someone where it's tangible, where they can feel it and you can affect them, I would never have thought possible. I thought it was crazy. Yeah. And when you're taking along the path, piece by piece in the proper order, to learn these skills, wow. You say martial arts and people are like, oh, he kicks and punches and that's great. It's kind of, not that I don't still do that, but it is so much more than that. So anyway, that's why you hear the passion in my voice over this and being able to share it with people and get them into it, and let them kind of discover on their own. Because if I get a new student and I start saying, hey, you're going to know how to, I start naming all the higher level funky skills, they're probably going to run out the door thinking I'm a crazy nut job teacher. So, and it's not about indoctrinating them into it either. It's only as someone is ready for it or if they ask. And that's how my teacher was. When I started asking, because what do they always say about internal arts? And not just Tai Chi, but yoga practices, things like that. They'll say it's good for the body, the mind, and spirit. But when people say spirit, they don't really think spirit. They think, well, kind of like high school spirit. I got my high school spirit. Yay, woohoo, let's go. No. We really mean spirit. And there's really things that you can learn to do with it. And also let's rewind to mind. There's a lot of things that you can do with your mind. And what it comes down to, I think, and from what I've gotten from my teacher and from many others as well, is that we as a species have abilities that we have kind of let go of or lost in modern civilization, modern culture. And there are those that are being exposed to them now. And I would never have found this if I wasn't fortunate enough to go to an event where I met Richard Clear, who is my Sifu and who I represent in my teachings, and felt some stuff from him physically and energetically in person where I went, whoa, what is that? Oh, this is nothing I've ever seen or felt or experienced. And that's usually what it takes, because I could tell you till I'm blue in the face about stuff and you can go, yeah, okay. But then when you feel it and experience it, it really changes and you want to go, what is that? And I'll give one example right now that almost everyone can identify with. This is one of the ones we use. Have you ever had the feeling that someone is staring at you? I think most of us at one point or another have experienced that. Have you, Mark? Have you ever had that?
Yes, I have.
Okay. So it's not that crazy of a thing to point out. Most of us have felt that. But what is that? Do we really examine that? How did you know someone was staring at you? They weren't so close that you actually felt their body heat. They were maybe 8 feet, 10 feet, 15 feet across the room, yet you sensed it. But we kind of dismiss that. We don't put a lot of thought into that. So what mind skill is that? You can feel another person's mind. And that's where it gets into the martial side of it, feeling their mind, knowing their intention, or from the healing perspective, using your mind to go into another person's body, or teaching them how to put their own mind in parts of their body where there's pain, and hopefully relieving it or adjusting it. So anyway, I could go on and on and on. I'm sorry, but this is kind of, I do voiceover and I love it and I'm passionate about it, but I found this whole other side, and I can merge the two together, which has especially happened during COVID, because while we couldn't be in person with people, I set up a professional Zoom studio in my Tai Chi studio, and I started teaching all my students online, which also is what brought about the further level of skill with being able to connect to people long distance, because I could see them on the screen and say, all right, let's work on this. And then you have that immediate feedback of that. Yeah, I can feel that. Holy cow. How are you reaching into my lower back and adjusting that pain? And it's really something. And I can use it to help my mom in Cleveland, Ohio. I had a student who early on in the pandemic was riding his bike in Manhattan, fortunately wearing a helmet, but was in a hit-and-run accident where an SUV slammed into him head-on. And he hit the ground. Fortunately, no broken bones, no concussion, but he was really banged up. And he was a very new student at that point in time. So I'm like, oh, man, I could possibly help relieve some of his pain, but like, he's not been with me any time at all. If I could tell him I could connect with him and do this energetic healing, he might think I'm some, freak job, and that'd be it. But I made the decision that, well, being able to relieve his pain potentially is more important. And I made the decision to tell him, hey, I know this is going to sound really wild and crazy, but one of the higher level things you learn in Tai Chi in internal arts is how to connect with someone energetically, and you can do it long distance. And, there's no guarantee. I might be able to relieve some pain. And he goes, heck yeah. I'm like, okay, good. And I was fortunately able to help manipulate some of his energy. His fiance the next day said, what the heck did he do to you? How is it the next day you are like way better than you were yesterday? And he tried to explain it to her, and had trouble explaining, because how do you know how to explain this? But that's what happened. And then later, his fiance had gotten COVID, and she got over it, but had remnants in her lungs from it. And so I had mentioned it to my teacher, and I said, I don't know that I want to mess with this on my own, but I know we can do something to help her. So we did a group Zoom call with her and connected and helped her out as well. There's just so much that we can do with this. So it's the other passion in my life, and it keeps me busy between being behind the mic and between teaching and my own training and traveling to train when it's not COVID. That's kind of what I do.
So it sounds like the sort of passion one has, or involvement, that does not have an end point.
Exactly. Yeah, there's no finish line. It's not like, all right, you've got your 2nd degree black belt and you're done. And there's no belts in Tai Chi. It just goes. You keep learning. And we
had mentioned before we started recording too about doing what one loves to do. Passion sometimes is used a lot, but we were talking about the different things that we do, and even podcasting for me, I know that I'm not doing this to make any kind of money. I'm doing it because it engages my mind and my spirit that you had mentioned, and my just my creative needs, because I have creative needs. I wake up, I have to create, or I get depressed. It's kind of weird.
I'd like to. Can I speak to that for a moment?
Yeah.
Doing something that you're passionate about, whether it's generating money or not, is very healthy. Unless it's getting in the way of you making money and putting food on the table. But you also find many times, not all the time, but many times, doing something that you're passionate about, the money will follow. And you didn't even intend that. Mm-hmm. I never intended to teach Tai Chi, but you get to a certain point where your teacher says, you don't have to open a formal school or anything, but at least unless you want to do that, but get a person or two and share this with. Start teaching. It will only make you better. So, and that's blossomed, and I created New Jersey Tai Chi, and now, it is admittedly a source of income that I never had before, and that's fine. That's great, and that's not why I did it. But as far as the creative outlet, I was in a workshop with my teacher just this past November where he insisted that every single one of us must have a creative outlet in order for him to continue teaching us. And some of the students didn't quite get it. He had to explain to them that, like let's just say, and I'm making this up, especially during COVID, but let's just say one of the students' answers was, well, sure, I go to Broadway shows or I read books. It's like, no. That's experiential. You must create. And he said, I don't care what it is. If you play an instrument, if you write, if you crochet, if you, whatever it is, find a creative outlet because it's very healthy. And as you continue to learn and increase your mind skill, your spirit skill, your overall energy, you need a place to focus that. Otherwise, many people will turn it into vices. And he goes, and I will not be responsible for you going on a drunk binge or, I don't know, crazy sex binge or, whatever it could be, something that's unhealthy for you. So find a creative outlet. You must, or I will stop teaching you. Well, okay.
I'm really happy to hear that because I have sometimes thought, Mark, is there something wrong with you that I get up at 4 a.m. and I have to make something of nothing, which is really the essence of it. It's creating something that was not there an hour before, and if it's a book or something like that, it's a long process and it takes you have to be able to sustain that. But it's the experience of making something that wasn't there before.
Yes.
It's really kind of strange, but I'm glad you brought that up. I don't feel so,
no, you're not strange.
There's nothing wrong with me.
At least about that. No, I'm just kidding.
Harry, I want to thank you a lot for coming on. It was so good to talk to you because we are friends, and Frank says hello, but we haven't, we don't see each other very often at all, and it was just really great to talk to you as your, as your professional Harry. Sure. And a martial arts Harry, and it's just I'm really glad that you agreed to do the first One Thing or Another podcast of 2021.
Thank you so much, Mark.
Now, how do you want people to be able to find you? You got Harry Legg. Let me go back here.
No problem. I can if you're interested in the voiceover side of me. It's harrylegg.com, and Legg is spelt with 2 G's.
Right.
And if you are interested in the martial arts side, even if you can't, study with me, you can read more about what I do and what it's about at NewJerseyTaiChi.com. Tai Chi is TAICHI. And New Jersey's fully spelt out, so NewJerseyTaiChi.com. And there's email contacts, so if anyone wants to ask me about anything in this or whatnot, I'm always glad to correspond.
I'm going to throw in one last thing here as we wrap up. because it always makes me think of my sister who teaches Chinese medicine. She taught it for years. Now she sees patients. She's 8 years older than me, so she's 70 this year. But it's a lifelong thing. She's still learning, but her knowledge, her accumulated knowledge of Chinese medicine is vast. So it's not something that you ever stop.
You don't. And I think of, what do I know now versus what I knew 10 years ago? What will I know 10 years from now that I don't know now? And even though you're a teacher, you're always a student. That is the proper attitude and the way it should be. If that ever shuts off, then you got a problem. But yeah, you're an eternal student. Absolutely.
Well, Harry, thanks again for coming on, and it was great to talk to you. And I hope that we can, when vaccines happen and all of these things, that we will see each other again.
You got it. Thanks again, Mark.
Tell Lenny hi.
And to Frank.
Bye. You've been listening to the One Thing or Another podcast with host Mark McNeese. Interviews and conversations with interesting people doing interesting things.